And there we go.
So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nathalie Largaudière. I'm the VP for Next Gen Government at GCOM. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Matt Mandrgoc, who is the head of US government at Zoom. And he's going to be talking with our chief collaboration architect, Tony Intrabartolo, about unified communication. I'm sure that you've all been overwhelmed with what was needed in the past 12 months in providing your remote workers or remote students the right solution. So first I will introduce who is GCOM. So GCOM is a services company whose mission is to help government to create healthier, safer, and more prosperous community. This mission is really into everybody's DNA at GCOM because most of our employees have whether worked for government or serving them for the past decades, starting with our CEO, Kamal Berwani. And so we believe that, as you know, Next Gen Government is really about improving well-being, addressing social inequity, and enabling a thriving economy. And it's been true more than ever during the pandemic. And so the way that GCOM is sharing with government how to obtain those outcomes is truly through this framework that you can read on your left around being edgeless, digital, and predictive. When it comes to edgeless, it's truly empowering the agencies to be sharing information with each other, removing the barriers and the silos across agencies, but also with external provider or businesses or constituents. Digital piece is truly about offering our constituents and businesses this kind of main entry door to any services that they are providing instead of going through every single agencies to get whether their benefits or other services that those agencies are providing. And predictive, it's moving away from like being in a reactive mode only or even proactive, but truly torturing the data and seeing how data are giving better insight to policymaker, elected officials, or business decision maker. And when it comes to unified communication and especially Zoom, we believe that they are really helping government to be edgeless and digital because their platform is truly allowing a unified communication across whether agencies and employees or also with constituents and businesses. So with this, I will let Matt and Tony taking over. Wishing you a great webinar and thanks again for joining today and spending some time with us. We will be posting this webinar on our website later today or tomorrow.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. So Tony Intrabartolo here. Let's talk a little bit. Why are we here and why are we discussing this now? So something that got really kind of brought to the forefront due to the pandemic was legacy technology and its limitations, especially when it comes to availability and being there for everybody in your team. So some of the biggest thing we've been hearing over the last year is the challenges of outdated on-premise based solutions. Basically, you host servers, you host the hardware, and then how does that work in this now distributed workforce? Also, we keep hearing about, I need a greater administrative simplicity and I need better analytics. I need to know how my communications are flowing. Are they successful? And are they being effective? And obviously, one of the biggest things going on right now is cloud adoption. Even before COVID, the idea of moving everything to the cloud for, once again, that greater accessibility, greater reliability, and also redundancy. So now you are not put on as an organization to worry about the redundancy because you now have a service offering that'll handle it for you. One of the biggest ones is usually cost reduction as well. And sometimes people don't look at some of the costs that they're paying that they don't even think about, like electricity for your data servers, for your cooling, just the mere space you have to rent to hold those kind of data centers. And then obviously things like network consolidation. You no longer have to have multiple networks going to multiple data centers or multiple nodes. Now you're using commodity internet and we're all going to the same place. And obviously the remote workforce, that became a huge thing last year. We all know it. Are you ready if that happens again, where you need to now put your workforce back into the home or have accessibility no matter where they are? So it comes down to what's in it for those that are out there looking, state, local government, federal government. What is the big motivating factors? Obviously, simplifying your communications, having a simple, unified communication stack and platform that will make it easier for the message to get across, time to decision to be quicker, as well as not be a challenge to your end users or constituents. You now have these channels. You think about Zoom, right? Zoom became a verb or an adjective of everything, and everybody knows how to use it. So that means your constituents as well. right? The people you're trying to serve in your agencies or even your interagency clients have an easier way to communicate with those people they need to quicker. Decreasing the cost, that's always a big thing. How do we get the costs down for our communications architecture? And once again, the increased mobility. I need to be able to get a hold of anybody, no matter where they are, and it has to be simple. It has to be ubiquitous, and it has to have that kind of democratization of communications, right? I don't have to be, this huge executive to have this kind of technology. It can be everybody in the organization up and down have the exact same access. So a couple of great quotes that came out of the last two Gartner quotes. By 2024, remote work and changing workforce demographics will impact meetings so that only 25% will take place in person, down from roughly the 60% today. I actually think that number's high. I think it's going to be less than 25% of meetings are going to be taking place in person. And also by 2024, 75% of the new unified communications licenses purchased will be cloud-based, up from 48 in 2019. That's a huge jump. That shows you where the market's going. And that shows you why things like Zoom are taking off in the industry and in the market today. So with that, let's talk exactly what I mean when we talk about a unified communications as a service. It means exactly what it sounds like. It's a service that handles phone, chat, file sharing, video, meeting room type systems, and contact center. It's the entire continuum of communications, right? It's in the cloud, which means it's available everywhere. There's no dedicated hardware required. Usually you just need a laptop of some sort to access it. And keep in mind, available everywhere means that I'm not tied to a data center. One thing that I think people get confused is this concept of unified communications as a service and then a hosted communication service. Reality is, if you get something that's hosted, that just means it's somebody else's data center. It's still a single point of failure. It's still a single point of access. While today's modern unified communication services are what's called multi-tenant and multi-cloud, which means no matter where you go, you're connecting to the closest, most reliable access point to your communication channel. You don't have to think about it. And the best part is when it's built into one R&D platform, right? So basically it's one unified platform that does everything, and it's not some kind of patchwork of multiple different platforms trying to work together to be effective. And when we talk about the industry today, we here at GCOM actually support many different UCaaS platforms. So we try to be a little bit agnostic. So this is the magic water for unified communications as a service for the past year. One thing I will point out that this is Zoom's first year having a full stack, aka they added phone roughly 2 years ago, if even that, and they've already moved into the leaders quadrant. But these are providers that can do phone, video, and chat, right? There are providers that only do, say, video or webinar, but they don't do the third part. So as you can see, the big players, Microsoft, RingCentral, Zoom, Cisco, 8x8 are the leaders. But from fun, I also want to look at the collaboration Gartner, which this is basically everything but phone. So webinar, video endpoints, online video meetings. As you can see, Zoom's the clear leader in that. So I have a feeling they're going to move up in the phone stack next year, but I don't know Gartner, but that's my guess. But just to understand, these are the big players. When you start working with us or working with your providers, these are the ones you're going to be looking at first. They are the ones that are clear winners in these markets. So I'm going to talk a little about Zoom, but then I'm going to let Matt talk more about Zoom. But a couple of things to keep in mind. One, we have a great partnership right now with Zoom. We in the state and local government, it's been a huge push for us. And one of these reasons is the fact that Zoom does actually have, most people know they have basically commodity Zoom and they have Zoom for government platforms. So obviously in the state and local and federal space, there are specific requirements, and Zoom has already made a platform that'll meet that. Obviously, they have web meetings, they have webinars. Here we are. They have Zoom Room. So if you have legacy video devices in your network, you can still connect them into Zoom. You don't necessarily have to completely shift your entire communications medium at once. They have phone, which hopefully everybody knows by now. It's something that people are shocked that Zoom has such a complete phone stack up and down. One thing they don't talk about much, but I think is neat, is digital signage. If you don't know what that is, so whenever you walk in some place and you see screens that have information on them, that's part of the platform for Zoom. So you can basically deploy an entire communication suite, even down to digital signage and things like alert markers and that sort of thing on one platform. And what made them big? You'll hear from me, ease of use. I think that's why it took off during COVID. I know that my parents use Zoom because it was easier for them to click a button and join a meeting. It's incredibly scalable, and you can see the statistics out there of how quickly Zoom expanded their platform to meet the needs of the virus and the market. They're incredibly innovative. They love to do things long before anybody else does. Anybody remember when virtual backgrounds was this incredibly cool thing that nobody had seen before? That was Zoom that did that, and now it's commonplace. They're very secure. Yes, they had some bad press a year ago, but then they stopped everything they were doing to, in my opinion, now have one of the most secure platforms out there when it comes to video, audio, and voice traffic. And with that, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little about your own company. I can't do all the gushing on your company.
No, thanks, Tony, and thanks, Natalie, for allowing me to be here with you today. As Tony mentioned, that we have two platforms. We have our regular Zoom commercial platform, which is used out there, and our Zoom for Government platform. Just the difference between the two is the Zoom for Government platform follows the U.S. federal FedRAMP authorization process, where we're impact level 2 moderate. So under that platform, we go through additional controls and security controls to have it authorized under that FedRAMP platform. And again, all of the capabilities, the web meetings, webinars, Zoom room connections, Zoom phone, digital signage, all reside under that FedRAMP platform, as well as our commercial version of the platform. As Tony also mentioned, different governments have different needs on how they do this. And we'll talk about these things in just a little bit, but as we go through a Q&A, but all of these different pieces, as you saw across there, in the Zoom for Government platform, you have a lot of capabilities. You talked about security. The ease of use became the biggest thing we saw across our users as we catapulted through this pandemic, tragic pandemic environment. Became a catalyst to allow state, local governments, federal governments, schools, businesses, healthcare, as well as people's personal lives, created a personal, ingrained in the fabric of their lives, an ease of use. So think of the ease of use component that now allows them to take that capability from their home environment where they've used it in their personal lives, now to get that same capability, ease of use out of and work and productivity out of their work life. Second component, tying into scalability, people were having to move home in a day. So now what they found in this, again, tragic pandemic environment, that what became really exposed was that current solutions were not scalable to allow for either, it was just a work from office environment versus a hybrid or work from home. So when people move thousands of people home, it created a lot of stress amongst the IT staffs and support staffs around those to help people scale and move back to home. Again, ours tied back to an ease of use, and we help people scale within hours and sometimes days, depending upon the size and scope of what they had to do, and allow them to do that. Tony mentioned innovation. Over this past year, we take a lot of feedback from our customer base, state, local government, federal, all the ones we've talked about. We pull it all in. We had over 300 new features built into both of these platforms. So as a scale across there, usually the Zoom for Government platform is usually a couple of weeks, a month or two behind the commercial version, because we have to have everything go through the FedRAMP process to make sure that it fits into meets all the security control protocols. But that innovation allows us to do things and allows our customers to adapt quickly to some of the capabilities they need. Extensibility, this is where you start to get into integrations. So a lot of times people look at, hey, I want a collaboration, a communication solution, but how do we integrate that into the workflow? A great example is even what we're doing in healthcare with Epic. It's built into the clinical platform. So as people have these visits, they go right into a Zoom meeting. They go in and have their visit. There's a charge component, and there's capability around there to have that patient engagement in a live sense. Now we're starting to look at the integrations, like the GCOMs have so many different integrations in what they do about the workflows in a state or local government. How do we take that extensibility and integrate Zoom into some of the investments that state and local governments have already made? And Tony mentioned security. Back in the April timeframe, Eric announced we had started a 90-day security plan. Well, that 90-day plan really is our evolving plan. We're constantly looking at all the expansion of what we're doing around security and encryption, all the pieces that tie to that. So this evolution that we're going through as we innovate and create security, safety, security, and privacy amongst all the different things around our product line, allow us to have that scalability and allow, as we see that state and local governments are transforming how they're doing business. One of the key things I'll bring up at the very end, as well as many of these organizations, state, local, we mentioned, Zoom became a catalyst for them to actually move their businesses forward. There's three key areas we'll kind of talk through as we go through here today that state, local governments are really looking at. Look at citizen engagement, you look at providing services, and employee productivity. And we'll talk about some of these things as we go along in the conversation. But this hopefully gives you a great framework of where we are and what we're doing. And I think as we go through some of the Q&A, you'll learn a couple more things around this platform.
Great. And with that, so what we're going to do kind of going forward here, guys, is we'll have our own questions. We're going to have some discussions. Feel free to go into the Q&A and ask questions so we can address them. But with that, I'm going to, not death by PowerPoint. So Matt, one thing that I find interesting, I'd like to hear from your side is, as you're going as Zoom into state, local, federal, what are you hearing from the people of what is their main driver? I mean, outside of the usual, we now have to work from home, there's usually more drivers for them. So what are you hearing?
Well, we're hearing that, a couple of things. There's only three ways you can work. You're at home, you're in the office, or hybrid environment. Everybody's in a different evolution of where they are and what does that mean? Some places have said we're going to go to a hybrid environment. That could mean that some employees are coming in on a daily basis. It could mean that some are in hybrid 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And there's others that may mean that some of those employees in that organization are working from home. What we found is I'll talk about three key areas in citizen engagement, services, and then employee productivity. So citizen engagement, what some states have found is, as they went to public hearings, and now they're starting to see assembly bills out there saying that from going forward, they're going to do remote public hearings. And they were getting more engagement from the community and from their constituents in these remotes than they were in person. If someone said, hey, we're going to do a meeting at 7 o'clock at night, and someone has a soccer practice or dinner or a family engagement they can't get to, they weren't able to get there, so they couldn't hear and be a part of what that engagement was going to be. Now they have the opportunity to do that. So it's the citizen engagement around that. The second component is around services. How do we provide services to our constituents and citizens, but not lose any degradation during this time frame? So this tragic pandemic pushed everybody home, and it put a lot of pressure on support staffs and IT staffs to provide the same type of engagements out there. And so they had to work from there. They had to find different skill components around this. How do we do this remotely? How do we engage people to get their driver's licenses, or court cases, or prisons, or any other type of engagement? Those come across there. What was tougher, but also a huge opportunity, was as they moved people from home, or people moved into different environments, they maybe move out of a city. Let's say I work in a state capital, but my family, we're going to move 2 hours away. I can't come into the office every day, but let's say I have a really key skill set around DMV, Medicare, Medicaid payments, around any of those type of skill sets. That state really wants me to still work there, but they have to provide me an opportunity. They want to provide me an opportunity to work remotely to do that and provide the same productivity, and not have to go out and hire someone who may have 15, 20 years of experience that they can really utilize and help them keep up the great citizen engagement they have across there. So now states are looking at, and the local governments are looking at, how do we engage people who may move or go somewhere and remotely, and be able to provide them the tools to be a part of that. And again, the whole thing is not just providing them the tools to work from home, but it's to provide the services that state wants to provide to their citizens. So those are the kind of key areas we start to see across there. And we talked about the ease of use and the one platform, right? One of the other things that became really exposed during this pandemic is the current solutions didn't scale. We mentioned that Zoom is one platform and has all these pieces off that platform. So nothing changes. So it allows you to be adaptable in any of those three environments: work from home, work from the office, hybrid environment. Where people had a lot of challenges was around how upfront you have to, their solutions didn't work. So there were hardware that just sat in offices while people work from home. IT staffs were scrambling to get people, spun up, provide security from home. So all of those pieces that kind of tie together, those solutions were sort of piecemeal together, and it became exposed around the whole pandemic that they weren't able to scale to this work from home environment. And we're not talking about, hey, we're going to transition people over a couple of days. We had people going home, thousands of people going home in a day. And so they had to be able to scale. So now, as you start to look at this transformation states and local governments are looking at, is how do we prepare ourselves in this environment? As you kind of mentioned, the Gartner report around by 2024, 74% will go into a cloud platform. People are making these decisions now, and what that transformation is going to look like in their environments. And the transformation is not they're planning out for 2 or 3 years. They're planning what's the next 12 months, because it's not just a pandemic. It's a natural disaster. Any other type of large challenge that people could have, you want to be able to move people home. The other part is a natural disaster is when, even being in the DC area, so many times we've seen a week at a time where people had to stay home because of snow. Well, imagine the productivity that you've given all of your employees, and whether they're state, local government, federal, whatever, you provided them the capability to be productive and do work from home. So there's no more, hey, I can't do work because all my stuff's at the office. Now you're providing that same capability and services while they work from home, and they can provide productivity.
And it's kind of interesting because it brings up one of the things that was amazing me. We had clients when this all happened, and they said, well, what was your work from home? How did you handle phones? And the number of them that said, we told everybody to forward their desk phone to their cell phone. And that was their work from home plan when this all started. So that's obviously a huge, huge driver for people to have a cloud solution. Natalie, did you have a question? Just making
Yes,
sure.
I do. So, and thank you, Matt, for walking us through some business case examples, especially around the citizen engagement. When we look at our state and local governments customers, I mean, most of them already had some type of solutions, whether they were using some Google platform for their EDU or K-12 schools, whether they were using some, Cisco WebEx, whether they were using some Microsoft Teams, or using all of those. So how would you advise them, and where should they start with Zoom, knowing that they might already have a patchwork of solutions? What truly differentiates you from the others? And what would be the step-by-step methodology you would recommend to be exploring how Zoom can really provide more benefits?
Great question, Natalie. So I think you take a step back, and as we kind of mentioned, there was incumbent solutions, whatever the incumbent solutions may be. And a lot of stuff was exposed. The capabilities were exposed during this pandemic timeframe. So as we start to look at where we see our customers asking questions, they're looking at, there's everybody always goes through new technologies or a process. They go people, process, technology. And then there's the fourth component, which ties into culture. Culturally, what are people willing to accept? So we saw this transition happen, almost 20 years ago, where traditional TDM voice versus IP voice, never going to happen, never going to happen. Now it's transformed. Now you're starting to see the same thing transform. And this transformation is really occurring where people are having to take a look at how do we actually do things, and do we do our services? Do we do our citizen engagement? Do we do things differently now? Because we can have things in there. Maybe things go back at one point. Chances are that people are transforming. It's not just because they're afraid of a pandemic, but people are looking at, how do I transform what we do? And again, you look at the citizen engagement, services, and employee productivity. We start to look at what is the impact of carbon, the people driving to work back and forth. What is the impact on personal wellness of that? If I don't have to spend 2 hours going back and forth every single day, but maybe I do it 2 days a week or 3 days a week, then it transforms where people, their family, their kids are from home. You have to be adaptable to this. So if someone said, hey, I got to stay home today and I have a sick child and all their stuff is in the office, but they can be at home and still get some stuff done, you're starting to see where people are starting to adapt that. We're not going to let anybody work from home. Now you're starting to see what are the processes that people are going to put in place to allow this to happen, the security mechanisms, and then be able to have a scalable solution. As Tony kind of mentioned, I'd have to, people are forwarding their work phones to their cell phones. Then there's another cost associated with that. Now with phone number, you can have it connected to a phone in the office, but I can pick up my computer, go home. I can have my phone in a soft phone environment. So any which way you do this. So now we're starting to see that methodology people are looking at, like, I want to figure out here how I move forward as an organization. What are the things we want to put in place? What are the parameters? How do we test it and then start to grow it?
So kind of like talking about the last year, well, excuse me, the pandemic was horrible. It did spur innovation like we've talked about. What do you think in the last year are name a couple innovations, especially in the state and local sector, that Zoom has made in response to the requirements of the state and local market?
Yeah, great question, Tony. So what we saw a lot was around courts. We saw transformation of courts who dockets that, in a day, a pandemic, I remember this distinctly. We got a call and we said, everybody's in this one state is moving everything to virtual starting tomorrow. So they were taking court dockets. They had this line of defendants, the attorneys, jurors, everybody else around there into this new environment. And so the other cases would be is where there's a court case and there's a defendant or someone out there in a different state. And instead of lining that prisoner up or that individual, taking them to that state for the hearing, they're able to do this. States are now working between each other in certain platforms to allow that to happen. So now you start to transform a couple of things. You look at that and say, okay, that's great. And we want to get back to a court, but they don't lose productivity. So they're able to have the court cases, be able to do things, but at the same time, it also provides us sometimes a level of security. So in very critical cases, where, maybe violent or whatever, you also provide a level of security around that environment as well for them. So the course was big, and we start to see things in the prison and how they're interacting that way. We're starting to see more and more on, like I mentioned earlier, there's assembly bills out there that now states are moving to almost a fully remote public hearings. So now in that environment, now some places are still working through what they're doing, but we've seen assembly bills out there that states are looking at this going, we're getting more engagement than we were with people coming at home. And I was mentioning some of the stories where if people have a conflict, they can't get there, let's say it's traffic, but they can still be involved from home. So again, it provides a level of productivity for the citizens to be engaged in what's going on in the community. At the same time, the state and local governments are providing the mechanism for those citizens to be engaged across the board.
So now we talk about all the great things that happen. What have you seen are the biggest challenges or the biggest, things that people will say against why a state and local government client may not want to go and move to the cloud or move to Zoom? What are the big naysayer issues that people need to kind of get through?
I don't think it's naysayers. I think it's how people are going, where they are in their process and understanding how it impacts their state or local government. Most places want to figure out a way they can do this. They're starting to understand that this is not a should we or shouldn't we, it's how are we going to do it and when are we going to do it. So again, the pandemic exacerbated the situation that catapulted people into this situation of figuring out how are we going to do this. So most places are figuring out how do we even move people to a home environment? How do we put processes in place around security, privacy, who works on what is the level of capability we're going to give people? Are we going to allow people to work 3 days a week from home, 2 days a week in the office? But have we created the work environment in the office to make it sustainable for social distancing while this transition is occurring? So it's really kind of a people process technology piece, and then how they're putting that framework in to do that. I don't think people are using the technology, but it's also how they start to take, we've talked about the public hearings on citizen engagement, pretty straightforward. We start to look at services. How do you maybe start to promote citizen engagement with services? So now I may not have to go to a DMV. I may not have to go to somewhere else. I may be able to talk to a state about, a building permit, and I can do this remotely. All of those things start to look in, and now you're really looking at is, how do we transform this? So many organizations have done things for so long a similar way. Now the technologies allow them to reinvent and sort of reimagine how they provide these services. And I don't call it as a challenge. I call this as a huge opportunity, as these innovative governors out there who are looking at this, how we communicate out to states, how they're using webinars to communicate out the messaging of their message out there. So there's so many great ways that they can take the same technology, put it onto their Facebook or YouTube platforms, and really make this a transformational way that they actually engage across the board, not only with constituents and citizens, but also with their employees.
And
if you can make
Matt,
someone else go to
this is-
DMV, I'll be good.
Yes. And Matt, you touched base a little bit about it earlier, but could you tell us more about Epic and the integration with Epic? Because a lot of our customers are health and human services agencies, and GCOMS has a great practice in health and human services, and there are some agencies with nurses, even practitioners. So could you tell us more about this business scenario that's specific to these employees?
Yep. So we have our healthcare group, and we've integrated some of this into what we're starting to see this now more and more in the state, local government health organizations, is the Epic integrated Zoom into their clinical platform. So now it's not just hey, we're going to go do a Zoom for something. It's tied to the patient signing up. It's a page tied into billing. It's tied into all of these pieces. We're part of Zoom is integrated as part of the solution. So if I'm doing a telehealth visit with you, that can be scheduled. That can be part of the billing structure. That can be part of my clinical engagement. So all of a sudden, you have a whole cycle here and tied in. And there's versions, as we go through some of this around meeting the HIPAA, BAA across organizations, and lower letters of attestation around what the organizations and how they allow it, but allows you to touch into these different areas. So we're going to see more of these type of integrations going forward, because people want to have this. They know that, if I'm at home, I may not have time to go to my doctor, but I have a cold. I know I may need something. So I can Zoom and do my telehealth visit. I can go to CVS, pick up my prescription, and I'm good to go. Something more serious, obviously, I go see the doctors. College daughters who, same thing, they can kind of tie in from a telehealth from the doctor if they have something or need something, but they don't have time to go down to the school health system, but be able to do these things from a remote location and be able to have the billing, the clinical record, all of those things tied in together. And that's truly where you start to see transformation. It's not just sometimes individual solutions that come together, but it now becomes part of the workflow. And I kind of mentioned this earlier. This is a great example of what we've done there. Now we're starting to work with companies like you guys. Look at all the different things you're doing around these different citizen engagements, these platforms, these workflows. Now it's important to start to see, how do we enhance that with the human interaction and the human touch around these things.
Thank you.
All right. So while Zoom is notorious for not giving away futures, the engineer in me would not forgive himself but and say, could you give us maybe a nugget of some features in the state and local, or even in the platform, that you're pretty sure are coming, that you're excited about, you think that will just take you even deeper into the market?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things, Tony, that is a great question, and for not being on the engineering side, we always see these great things coming forward. What I can share is I've seen a lot of the great capabilities our customers are coming forward and asking for. And we talk about workflows. Sometimes it's as simple, okay, we're doing a meeting, great. Security features, great. We got these other things, awesome. But now it's starting to figure out, like, hey, I like to see this capability because I want to do this. Hey, I want to have this capability. If you think about security capabilities, all these other things out there, waiting room, many of these things, we have a whole line of all of the different product components that feature sets that customers are asking us for. And so now I think you're going to start, so you've seen this great innovation from us before. I truly believe you're going to see some really interesting innovations from us coming forward, and it's not going to stop. The key is we're so focused on the customers around and their feedback that it provides us the foundational component of how, this one platform we build, we don't have to go do all these different things around there to bring these things together. We have a capability, a platform that we can make changes and additions onto from not only from a feature set, but I'll tell you the innovation is also coming from our security side. All of the different capabilities from end-to-end encryption, all the things that we're doing across there. This innovation and the features and security platforms that we're capabilities that we're putting in place is really going to start to catapult us, especially as we start to see the growth coming around Zoom Phone. The capabilities of what you're going to see, some of those you mentioned, the hybrid environment coming back. People are going to start looking at, hey, we've had to work from home. Now we want to do digital signage. We don't want to have somebody at the front desk. We're going to have capability. We're going to use digital signage. Essentially, if there's a building and there's a challenging situation, how do you message out to people? So there's a bunch of ways I think people are going to have to look at, not just these capabilities and what they're asking for, but those capabilities are things that we're going to use to build on to the future. And the great thing is so many of our customers have been so forward thinking around what they're looking for and how we built that into our platform.
All right. So let's see. I think we covered everybody's questions.
I have another one, because not everybody knows that, you talked about phone. Not everybody knows that there are some Zoom phones, because back to the culture, there's still a need somehow for some users to not be using, their laptop as a phone or their tablet as a phone. So could you share with us, why Zoom phones, and what do you see, again, the benefits for our state and local government customers?
Yeah, great question. So the capability, we kind of touched on a smidge at the very beginning, but what I'll say is on the Zoom Phone, as we move this capability, again, we have it in both platforms. Zoom and the Zoom for Government. Zoom for Government is covered under the Federal Impact Level 2 Moderate, so it all under that platform. So in this capabilities, it's one phone number across the board. So whether you're working from home, from the office, or in a hybrid environment and have to move quickly, that platform allows you to connect to a hardware component if you need to in the office. So we have relationships with a number of hardware vendors who can actually plug phones in. So you can have the capability of using a phone, the capability of using a headset. And so any environment you use, you're able to scale to that. And what happened, we found, was the scalability along the cloud component was great. But when you have some of the traditional telephony components that were very difficult, people couldn't scale. And that was the number one thing we saw across with it. Someone goes, I have millions of dollars sitting here and I can't use it because I want to scale my numbers, but it's costing me money to forward this to my cell phones. Now I got costs associated with my employees doing things. And it becomes, you're kind of piecing the solution together. Here, we've allowed the opportunity to do that. I can scale my phone. If my number rings, my phone number rings on both my Zoom on my computer and on my Zoom app on my phone. And if worse comes to worse, it can also forward into my cell phone if I need to. So I can't remember the last time, except at home, I picked up a phone the other day and I was kind of laughing, except for my cell phone, what that capability is. But that scalability component that you have across to be able to have that, use a hardware component if you want to, or you have the capability to have it come right to your phone on the Zoom application and take a phone call from your work phone number and not have to give out your personal number. Also, as a personal protection for those who have state and local government employees who are having to potentially work from home and don't want to have their cell phones or symbols exposed. I mean, imagine the situation if you had an angry person, let's say Tony calls in, he's mad about his 15th ticket at DMV. Not saying that Tony has any tickets, but that's just a hypothetical situation.
Life imitates art. Go ahead.
Exactly. But that capability allows that, if I saw the cell phone number, I would call that person directly if I was really, really mad. Here also is a protection that you have in privacy for that employee as well. So it ties into that whole workflow process you have across.
Thank you.
Let's see. So I think I have most of my questions. So why don't we do this, because we are running up a little bit on our time here in a few minutes. So I'll give both of you a chance at parting words on your thoughts of the cloud and the state and local government. I'll let Natalie go first on what she thinks is going to be the big driver for GCOM and Zoom going forward.
I think that we truly have the skills in what matters for customers now, because as I mentioned, GCOM is solely focused on state and local government, and 95% of our business is with state and local government. So we know their business, we know their culture, we know, the business scenarios that Matt was mentioning earlier, and we have the services and the skills and the experience within our teams. So it's definitely a differentiator with the agility and value that we bring to our customers. And the partnership that we have with Zoom is unique because it's really back to that infrastructure modernization foundation that state and local government customers needs to be able to transform and offer this new type of services that customers are demanding, because the pandemic has accelerated the state and local government transformation by many years, maybe for some of them by a decade. And so now I think that constituents and businesses are hungry for more and for having new ways to be engaging with their state and local government agencies.
So with that, then I'll go to Matt. Matt, what do you think is going to be the biggest driver, and how Zoom will be able to drive into that new state and local modernization that Natalie's talking about?
Yeah, great question. So the transformation takes place again, as we kind of mentioned early on, the pandemic became the catalyst for innovation and acceleration. If you would have thought that maybe if that wouldn't happen, would we even be in a technology and how you utilize technology in a remote or hybrid environment? So this transformation, as Natalie mentioned, was accelerated. So now, how do you scale fast, ease of use, get your employees using things and adapt to this quickly versus having to go through very cumbersome? Again, it puts the support team and IT team structure at a huge challenge for them, and puts a lot of stress on them because of the scalability. It's not that you have 2 or 3 people, you have hundreds, maybe thousands of them out there. And in organizations like GCOM who know this environment well and start to look through, they're looking at all the technologies and they're looking at these things that what innovates and helps us take these workflows, these citizen engagements, these capability and services that are needed, and the employee productivity for these state and local employees. How do we accelerate that innovation, that modernization that they're looking to do, but also positioning for the future? You start to look at where we talk to our customers around what they're looking at. The decisions that the customers are making through this acceleration is not just for the next 30, 60, 90 days, or even a year. They're looking at, we're transforming the next 3 to 5 years. How do we want to do this? Where do we see this going? And what are the platforms that we're going to put in place to allow us to accelerate this innovation and transformation in our own states?
And what's interesting, and it starts to happening, I mean, the mayor of New York City yesterday was announcing that 80,000 of the employees would go back to the office in person. And so there's a new transition happening. It's going back to the office. And that's going to trigger also new opportunities, both for our customers and for our companies, because now that employees have taken some habits in working with those tools that are highly innovative and highly flexible, they're going to be expecting the same in being back in the office. So there's a new way that we need to be supporting our customers to make sure that they're going to be successful with this transition.
One last thing, that's a great point. One thing I'll add is we've seen customers who I've talked to, who talk about how much more productivity they're getting. So imagine being in the office and I'm in a large building and I have a meeting at one time and I'm running 5 minutes behind, but I have a 10-minute walk to this other building. Well, it's a half-hour meeting. I've lost 15 minutes of time of that 30-minute meeting, so I'm not getting as much productivity. Now, individuals are starting to look at, hey, I'm going to have this time set aside from a government side. I'm going to have a half a day to do these many meetings with vendors. And this is the time I'm going to do this. I'm going to have my staff meetings this way because I can get people who may be remote or some may be in hybrid environments. So people are starting to see at the state and local government, as well as federal and other areas, they're getting more productivity around the opportunity, and they're getting the best use of their time. And talking about productivity, it's about time savings, about what you can get done in a certain amount of time. And people are starting to say, hey, I can get on a call and I actually am going to get the full half hour out of that call versus, okay, you were 5 minutes late, you were 8 minutes late, I got to repeat myself. And people aren't getting the most out of that. So we're starting to see a little different environment, view set of how people are approaching this. Not just, hey, it's work, we got everybody back in the office, but it's how are you also looking at productivity and what is that going to look like as they go back into the office? And I think you're going to start to see some adapting on, what that's going to look like.
Definitely.
And what I also find interesting in that is I've had clients over the last year, exactly to your point, that yes, they were forced to go remote, but they also learned in some cases they were more efficient that way because of the fact of somebody was either with their kids or could run back out and in, and are actually starting to, and you're seeing this in the market now, not buy office space because it was such a huge expense. So I think hybrid is going to be the word going forward. There's always going to be a need for team meetings and in person. And as they say, the shaking of the hands, but I don't think that's going to be the primary workspace anymore. I think the new primary workspace is going to be wherever your resource is or needs to be at that given moment.
And I think it's not only how they adapt that new environment they've gotten used to working in, but it's how the in-office work environment is going to change with social distancing, where you had small cubicles really close to each other, open work environments. You're going to start to see that environment starting to change. And that's the transformation a lot of people are going to go through because they bring people back. They have to put the mechanisms in place to actually protect employees, to make sure that things are socially distanced. And with those who had very close working environments are now looking at this, how do we do this, bring people, if we do want to bring people back, have we set the right parameters for our in-office work plan to fit into cover and protect our employees?
Matt, as a last question, and I don't want to forget to congratulate you and Zoom for this exponential growth and all the benefits that you provided to millions of people across the globe. But I'm curious about what happened in the White House, because it seems like I understood that the new president is using Zoom. So do you have any behind the curtains, how did this happen? And what was truly the key differentiator for them to choose Zoom and have those meetings with elected officials across the globe on Zoom?
That's a great question. In many cases, we don't share a lot of information that we work along with customers. I think a lot of people have seen things in the news where, President Biden was doing his inauguration, COVID events, other large scale meetings across our Zoom for Government platform. And we're honored and humbled around that, that environment's occurring. And we don't really talk about the details around some of those things with the customers, but these are public things that people have seen out there. And this is why I think you and others have asked us a lot of questions around that. But you're seeing that, I think you're starting to see, in any situations, government officials are being sworn in, government officials are changing the way they're doing things around this. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to share some of the things we're doing. And I think our approach to this has always been, in any of the state, local government, federal, all of our customers, is taking a very humble, hard work approach. Make sure we're listening, make sure we're the partners we're caring about, and making sure we're helping them transform out there, evolving ourselves and working along with the customers and partners like you, the GCOM, to do that. And we look at this as been a great engagement for us, as we've helped so many transform as they work along, and people have entrusted us to help them work through this and now helping them scale into this new, adapt into this new accelerated innovation that they're going through right now.
Thank you.
So I think with that, that's a good place to end it as we come to the clock. So for everybody here, thank you for coming. We will make this recording available within the next 24 hours. Matt, I'd like to thank you for your time. Natalie, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tony.
And everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.